You're listening to the West Salem Foursquare Church podcast. For more information and to plan a visit, go to wsfc.org.
Well, we began this teaching series last weekend. We started a series called God with Us, and it's a teaching series that will culminate on Christmas Eve. I mentioned the two services that we'll have together. It'll culminate on that evening. And in this series, what we're doing is we're unpacking a pretty significant, a pretty weighty, a pretty heavy theological concept, but we're doing it in a very practical and a very real-world way. This concept is called incarnation. Incarnation. And what this belief is one that we hold to deeply as Spirit-filled, Bible-believing Christians. We believe that Jesus, the second member of the Trinity, of the Godhead, took on an earthly body, a human body, and everything that entails. And he lived on this earth both as fully man and as fully God. Try to figure that one out. It's an amazing mystery. And the Bible is supporting that doctrine, that theological concept in this particular verse. It's Matthew chapter 1, and it's verse 23, and it's going to serve as a launching pad, not only for this series, but really the launching pad for our Christmas Eve services when we gather on that evening. And it says this, it says, "Look, a virgin will conceive a child," and it puts exclamation points because that's good news. "She will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel." Now, a little side note for you. Sometimes you'll see Emmanuel written with an I or also with an E. Either one is just fine. It's been handed down in different ways throughout the centuries. But he will call him Emmanuel, which means, and I want to say this all together in this room. Here we go. God is with us. Let's do it one more time. God is with us. Now, we're talking about the presence of God in different seasons of our life. There's various seasons that are available to us in this life. There's the young ones here in the front row. There's older ones in this room, and you've lived different times in your life, and you've gone through different things, and we learn how to understand the presence of God in different ways at different times, depending on what kind of life is happening around us. And last week, what we talked about is how God is with us in the valleys. He's with us in the valleys, and we learned a really key principle, and this principle is this, that we enjoy God on the mountaintops. We enjoy him on the mountaintops, but we get to know him intimately in the valleys. Okay, we may enjoy God and his presence and some of the cool things that he's doing when we're way at the top and everything's going great, and his high fives and his fist bumps. But when we're down in the valley and we're walking through and we're sludging through something, and that's where we get to know God intimately. And today what I want to do is I want to take that a step further, and I want to talk about how God is not only with us in the valleys, but now today, how he's with us in the storms. In the storms. I want to talk about the storms of life. The emotional storms, some of the physical storms, the health storms. Talk about the challenges that you and I face as we go through different seasons of our lives. And you might be flat out right in the middle of a storm. You might be in the middle of something really traumatic, something that's got you on edge, something that's got you worried and concerned. You might be right in the middle of it. Others of you in your season of life, you may have come out of a storm, or you may be coming out of a storm, and you're able to look back and go, wow, that was crazy. It was crazy what I just went through. You may be coming out of it. Others of you may be on the front side of this thing, and you may be working your way forward, and you don't know it. Unbeknownst to you, you could be facing a storm in your future. Now, I'm not a prophet, and I wouldn't will this upon anyone that they go through tough times or hard times, but I just know how life works. I know how humanity works. And none of us are immune to storms. None of us are immune. We can't get away from them. They're happening all over. And storms, I would say it this way, storms are inevitable. Now, let's talk about actual real storms, like the weather kind. If you were to turn on the news, or you look in the paper, or you surf in the internet, you're going to hear, without a question in my mind, you're going to hear about some kind of a storm in some place around the world. Whether it be a hurricane there, a tornado here, or snowstorms on the East Coast. I mean, you're going to hear about storms. Have you ever noticed this, though? Have you ever noticed that storms are oftentimes named after people. Have you noticed that? The storms are named, the big ones. The ones that maybe take lives, the ones that really destroy property. They're named after people. Now, I started researching this a little bit, and I did a deep dive into Wikipedia on storms. And how many know, like, if you go into Wikipedia, you start doing a deep dive, it's like, 3 days later you emerge, right? Because you keep clicking these links, and it keeps taking you further and further and deeper and deeper. And here's what I discovered. 1954 was the first year that U.S. meteorologists started naming storms after people. Before that, they were naming them after places or regions. They started in 1954 to name storms after people. And for 25 years, for the next 25 years, they named storms specifically, and some of you know where I'm going with this, after females, after women. Okay, I'm going to make no more commentary on that whatsoever. Okay, but these meteorologists would perhaps name them after a girlfriend or a wife or an ex-wife. They would. So, and then they came up to 1979. 1979, there was a move to bring about equal rights for storms. Right? And so now it opened up, and now they could start naming storms after men as well. So that's kind of the history of how storms are named. Now, I want to draw an analogy here for us. Think about this in your own personal lives, because sometimes you could name a storm after a person. You could name it after a dad, or it's Storm Mom, or it's Storm Mean Boss, or it's Storm, maybe you want to expand it to an event like Storm Divorce, Storm Bankruptcy. Those kinds of things can happen. I was thinking back about this as I was preparing this teaching. I was thinking back, kind of like reminiscing, and I want to tell you a story. And Denise heard this story for the first time, like the second service, last service. And those always scare my wife when I tell stories that she's never heard before. But I was thinking about this week, how when I was a junior in high school, I was in a class, and it was called Creative Writing. And it was taught by Miss Schultz. And this was years ago, so I'm remembering this. And Ms. Schultz taught a creative writing class, and I was in this class, and she gave an assignment to write your autobiography. So write an autobiography. Okay, so that's the assignment. And I sat down, and I was trying to put together the construct of this autobiography, and here's how I did it. It had 4 chapters, so 4-chapter autobiography, 4 sections to it, and each section was named after a girl that broke my heart. Each section. I can go back. The first one actually was in elementary school. I can remember I was in a private Catholic school, and this girl, I won't use a name because our podcasts go out pretty far. And she broke my heart. It was really bad, and it was like that young love, and it's just and I just cried and cried and cried, and then moved fast forward into middle school and a couple events then, and then into high school, and right prior to my junior year, that last 4th chapter was named after a girl who was also in my creative writing class. These are the kinds of events that shape us, friends. And maybe it's a person, maybe it's a particular place, maybe it's a specific pain that you might be going through. You could say it's storm cancer, it's storm diabetes, a particular problem that you might be facing right now. And what happens is we start to blame these particular people, events, places. We start to project onto them that you did this to me. It's your fault that I'm going through this right now. You could say it's storm parents' divorce and blame them for how you turned out because of what they did years ago. Or you could say it's storm devil and blame the devil for something. And by the way, the devil is to blame for a number of things going on in our lives. But he's not the only place that we could put blame. And we certainly shouldn't project blame on a bunch of other people, because here's some realities that I want to check you with. The realities is that sometimes, most often actually, we create the storms. We're the ones stirring up the mess, right? Everywhere we go, there's a wake. Maybe it's something you said. How many of you have ever said something and had it come out of your mouth, and the moment it came out of your mouth, you're like, uh-oh, oh no, right? But then you're committed to it. And rather than just stopping and saying, I am so sorry I said that. Please, will you forgive me? Instead, you're like, you get belligerent, right? You're like, yeah, and I meant it, that kind of thing, right? And you just stand by that. No. Maybe it's something you said. And you created a storm that follows you. Perhaps for you, it's an area where you overdrank. And now you got drunk, and now the decisions that you made from that point just started to snowball, if you will, into destruction. Maybe you've had people come to you and say, hey, listen, I want to be honest with you and just tell you, the person you're dating, it's not good. It's going to produce some problems in your life later. Maybe you've been engaged to be married and you've had people speak wisdom into your life, godly people that say, man, I'm sorry, but I think the road that you're entering onto or the direction you're going is going to produce some destruction in your life. Rather than moving forward, you may want to consider and submit this to the Lord. And yet you look at him and say, no, I've made up my mind. I'm doing what I want to do. I just want to be happy. And you start making those decisions, and they produce a storm. So yeah, we could blame the devil. Yeah, we could blame other people at times. But really, we got to be honest. We got to say, listen, where is my sin producing this kind of a storm? Let me take it a step further. Where is my stupidity producing this kind of storm? Right? We could blame Satan. We can blame sin. But we really need to take a look at our own stupidity. These are the kinds of things that produce storms. But regardless of how you found yourself in the middle of something, if you're in the middle of the storm, the big idea that I want to transmit to you today, the big idea I want you to grab onto, and if you're taking notes, this is what I want you to write down. Here is the big idea. Don't allow the presence of a storm to cause you to doubt the presence of God. Amen. Just because there's a storm, don't allow that to creep into your heart and go, well, God's nowhere here. He hasn't met me here. I'm in the middle. I'm all on my own. And the challenge for a lot of us is we put ourselves in that place. We put ourselves in that place, and then we try to do it on our own. And just like we said last week, is that we may enjoy God on top of the mountaintops, but we really get to know him intimately when we're in the valleys. Here's what I believe about this. Is that we may find that life is super fun when all things are smooth sailing. The waters are placid, they're like glass. You're just soaring along. Life is a lot of fun. But friends, it's in the storm where faith is really developed. It's in the storm where our faith goes deeper. It's in the storm where we learn how to grow in our prayer life. If you've ever been in a tight spot, you seek the Lord. You're asking God for help. As a matter of fact, the most profound, simplest, and shortest prayer really is only 2 words. Lord, help! Lord, help! And we don't learn that when it's all smooth sailing and the waters are nice and calm. We learn that when we're in the middle of some real challenging things. And I want to take you to a text in the Bible that I think illustrates this best, and it involves Jesus. It's in Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. If you have your scriptures, let's turn there. And starting in verse 22, we're just going to read 2 or 3 verses. I could have taken you to the book of Matthew. The story is there in chapter 8. I could have taken you to the book of Mark. The story is there in chapter 4. And I'll refer to those briefly, but in Luke chapter 8, it captures a time when Jesus is on the water with his disciples and things got dicey. Let's look here. Starting verse 22, it says, one day, Jesus said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side of the lake. So they got into a boat and they set out. And as they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake so that the boat was being swamped and they were in great danger. Verse 24 says, the disciples went and woke him, saying, Master, Master, we're going to drown. Notice how they had to say it twice. Right? Master, Master. It's like when mom has to wake you up for school in the morning, right? Or a spouse has to nudge you and go, John, get up, you're running late. Master, Master, we're going to drown. And he got up and he rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided and all was calm. Where is your faith? He asked the disciples. And in fear and amazement, they asked one another, who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him. They obey him. Mark chapter 4, if you were to look there and kind of parallel, which these Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, have been called the synoptic Gospels. They work together so well. Mark 4 tells us that Jesus was actually in the stern of the boat. And in the stern of the boat, he's there, and it says he's sleeping on a cushion. So like he got a cushion out, he just made himself a nice little spot. If you've ever been out in the water, if you ever just kind of laid out in the front of the boat and got, you know what I'm talking about? Just this really calm place. And Jesus was there sleeping. Why? Because he's fully God, and yet he's also fully man. He has to sleep. We know God never sleeps and never slumbers, but as a man, he's like, I'm tired. I'm going to lay down, and I'm going to sleep. And there he was on the cushion, and the disciples came up to him, and they shook him and said, Master, 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 do you not care that we're going to die? Why aren't you awake? This isn't fair. We're gonna perish here on the middle of the water, and you're sleeping on a cushion. And in Mark chapter 4, it tells us he got up, he rebuked the wind, and he said to the waves, here's what he said. He said, quiet, be still. Quiet, be still. That word quiet that we have in the Greek language, it actually means hush. It means to hold one's peace. Other translations have given it to us this way, where Jesus would stand and say, peace, be still. Peace, be still. Such an appropriate moment that just happened right there. Peace, be still. In the season that we're in right now, not just because it's Christmas, but perhaps the season that you're finding yourself in, you may be struggling to be still. And there's not peace anywhere to be found in your life. I believe that Jesus came to not only calm the storm, but he came to calm our soul. He came to calm our soul. Peace, be still. And the real peace in your soul is not found in the absence of a storm. It's found in the presence of Jesus. Let me say it to you again, because that's powerful. The real peace is not found in the absence of a storm. It's found in the presence of Jesus. And what that tells us is you could be right smack dab in the middle of a storm. And when Jesus is with you, it is well. And a lot of us, we're working really hard to try to get rid of the storm or to ignore the storm, to put our head in the sand and go, I don't see any storm. I don't feel any storm. No storm. And what we end up doing is we end up doing a lot of things in our own power. We end up trying to navigate the boat on our own, to navigate the storms on our own. And friends, this is not a good idea, but yet we keep doing it. We keep achieving the same results. It isn't working for us. And here's what we do. We end up moving into some different compulsions, if you will, that are negative. And I want to give you 4 compulsions that we find ourselves moving into in order to try to navigate the storms. Here's the first one. If you're taking notes, it's the navigating it through commotion. Commotion, what do I mean by that? Well, it involves a lot of hurry, a lot of hustle, a lot of activity. If I could just outrun and outwork the storm, we'll get past it. We'll just get past it. I had someone recently just ask me, how you doing, John? This was just last week. And I said, oh, man, I haven't been healthy. I've been sick, actually. And they said, well, what are you doing to get better? I said, I don't know. I'm just moving faster, and I'm going to stay ahead of it. Really, is that the answer? Is it just more hustle? More commotion? What about this? Maybe we try to deal with this through distraction. Through distraction. Distraction would be where we find ourselves trying to take our mind off the storm by what? By our devices. If we could just scroll some more, or if we can just binge watch on a screen, we could just kind of block everything else out as if distraction is going to get us through it. We also try to gain more information. Here's the third thing, information. Where if we could just get more facts and more figures, if we could just research the storm, we could find out what makes it work and how it can stop in our lives. And we think that more information becomes more power, and it doesn't. It just bogs us down. And lastly, I'll mention addiction. Addiction is our effort to try to get out of one storm by creating a bunch of other little storms. How do we do that? Well, we don't want to deal with the storm that's in our life here, and so we run to drugs. We run to alcohol. We run to food. We run to porn. And we're just creating more and more storms. And when we do this, it's kind of like, watch this, it's kind of like us pushing Jesus out of the boat. Look at me. I am the captain now. You all right? All right. Little movie reference for you. I'm the captain now. Psalm chapter 46, verse 10, I think, gives us a much better way. Here's the better way. The better way is be still and know that he is God. Peace be what? Still. And know God is with us. If you go back to that psalm, in Psalm 46, verses 1 through 3, it says, God is our shelter. And he's a place we can run to. In the middle of that storm, he is this hiding place or this refuge. He's our safety, the scripture tells us. He is our strength, the Bible tells us. He is always ready. The way that puts it, it says, he is an ever-present help. An ever-present help, always ready when we're in our time of need. That's God. Why? Because he loves us. He's passionately, deeply in love with us. He is with us. Emmanuel, God with us. Why is he with us? Because he loves us. He's with us because he loves us. If you were to go to Psalm 46, go back to verse 2, you would discover it says this, therefore, because God is with us, therefore we will not fear. Though the earth give way, though the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, though the mountains are shaken. We could add, if we wanted to keep adding to that, we could say, even if I lost my job, even if my spouse left me, even if that relationship fell apart, even if the economy gets bad again, God is still with us. He's still with us. Why? Because he loves us. He's for us. He's not against us. He'll never leave us. He'll never forsake us. Because he's exactly what we need. He's our safety. He's our strength. He's our source. He's our redeemer. He's our righteousness. He is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Are you catching all this? Right? He's our rock. He's our living water in whom we go to as the source. He's the one who is the gate that we walk through to get to eternal life. He is the peace. He's the guide that brings us into a safe place. He directs our steps. Friends, this is the person of Jesus. And that peace is not found in the absence of a storm. The peace is found in the presence of God. And so if you're praying, oh man, I want my storm to go away. I don't know if that's a terrible prayer, but I'll give you a better one. Jesus, would you be with me right in the middle of this storm? Would you guide me and strengthen me and help me? He is an ever-present help in our time of need. Amen? Amen. Amen.
Thanks for listening to the West Salem Foursquare Church podcast. For more information and to plan a visit, go to WSFC.org.